1, 2, and 3 are finding trigonometric ratios from a point on the unit circle. Again, if we have the point that x is equal to the cosine, which is the adjacent over the hypotenuse, the y is the sine, which is the opposite over the hypotenuse. So, if I have my triangle, this top number here would be the adjacent, so it's going to be 3 over the hypotenuse, which is 5. The top number here is going to be the opposite, and actually it's going to be negative 4. So I'm going to be going down. So 3, 5, and negative 4, since this is my adjacent, my opposite, and my hypotenuse. Now I'm going to find the exact values, and now they're going to throw in more than just the 3 basic ones. So we have the sine, which was the opposite over the hypotenuse. The inverse of the sine is the cosecant. The cosecant is the hypotenuse over the opposite, just flipped upside down. Cosine was adjacent over hypotenuse. The secant is that inverse, so hypotenuse over adjacent. Tangent was opposite over adjacent. Cotangent is going to be adjacent over opposite. So we're going to do the cosecant, the sine, and the cotangent. So my cosecant, my hypotenuse over my opposite, my sine's going to go the other way around, my opposite over my hypotenuse, and my cotangent, my adjacent over my opposite. So, hypotenuse over opposite, 5 over negative 4 would be negative 5/4 then. Sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse, so negative 4 over 5, negative 4/5. Cotangent is the adjacent over the opposite, 3 over negative 4, so negative 3/4. Now hopefully you have those written down. I got to move the board here. So on number 2, again, since this is the cosine, this is going to be the adjacent over the hypotenuse, and this will be the opposite over the hypotenuse. So my adjacent's going to be negative 15, and my opposite's going to be 8. My hypotenuse is going to be 17, which tells me I have to go negative 15, 8. So negative 15, 8, and 17 would be my triangle. My tangent. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. My cosecant is opposite of sine, so it's the hypotenuse over the opposite. And my cosine, and I'm going to stick it down here, cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. So my tangent, my opposite over adjacent, so I'm going to have negative 8/15. Cosecant, hypotenuse over the opposite, so hypotenuse over the opposite, 17 over 8. And then cosine, adjacent over hypotenuse, negative 15/17 then. Of course on Alex they always put the negative in front of the fraction. And the third one here, we would have my adjacent over my hypotenuse and my opposite over my hypotenuse. So my adjacent is square root of 2, my opposite is square root of 2, and my hypotenuse is 2. So, since those are both positive, we are going to have square root of 2, square root of 2, square root of 2, and 2. So both my adjacent and my opposites are square root of 2. We want to do the secant, the sine, and the tangent. The secant is opposite of the cosine, so it's going to be hypotenuse over adjacent. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, tangent opposite over adjacent. So my hypotenuse over my adjacent would be 2 over the square root of 2, but of course I have to rationalize the denominator. So I get 2 square root of 2 over 2. Those would cancel out. Just gives me square root of 2. My sine, opposite over hypotenuse, square root of 2 over 2. And my tangent, opposite over adjacent, square root of 2 over the square root of 2, just gives me a 1. So I get square root of 2, 2 square root of 2, and 1 for my 3 answers. So again, just double check, sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse. The inverse of sine is cosecant, so hypotenuse over opposite. Cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. The inverse of the cosine is the secant. The secant would be the hypotenuse over the adjacent. Tangent, opposite over adjacent. Inverse of that is cotangent, so adjacent over opposite. You'll be using those quite a bit, so you'll want to keep a list handy.